Okay, I'll start the connector with you first.
Connectra creates opportunities for people with disabilities by providing information, resources, and programming geared towards greater inclusion and quality of life. On Service Mondays, we highlight a local organization or initiative. On February 5th, we hear from BC Centre for Ability about their accessible employment programs. Then on February 12th, join Eric to discover the richness of the Disability Foundation's own programming. Monday, February 19th is Family Day in British Columbia, so there will be no programming. On the 26th, join Lauren from Emotions BC for a presentation on the importance of caring for your mental health. On Tuesday, February 27th, find your next read and engage in an insightful discussion on the representation of disabilities in literature through our new book club in partnership with the VPL. On Friday, February 16th, learn how to plan your garden with Digga. Tuesday afternoons are for creative writing with Emily. Wednesdays are chair yoga with Bobby Seal-Kabisky. Thursdays are adaptive fitness with Ocean Rehab and Fitness. Fridays are contemporary improv dance classes with Janice Lawrence. Visit the events calendar on Connectra's website, connectra.org, for more information and to register for events.
Okay, you can start.
Great, wonderful. I'd like to begin with land acknowledgement, and I just want to acknowledge that I live and work in the traditional and ceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. I do have the pleasure and privilege of working out of the Vancouver office here in British Columbia and the Lower Mainland. And a very special thanks to Kawsafran Disability Foundation for your tech support, and also for the staff at Connectra for holding these weekly workshops, and they've been very beneficial for all of us, including myself. And again, it's a great privilege to be sharing some information to all of you as a representative of BC Centre for Ability. So I just want to share my screen here. The presentation centers around employment. Specifically, unlocking employment opportunities for people of all abilities. Why are we talking about this? Well, BC Centre for Ability, we have employment programs here that are specifically geared for persons with disabilities. One of the most long-standing services we would provide through the Opportunities Fund, but we also have a Coast Capital funded and RBC funded THRIVE program. It's a program for youth employment as well. But today, what I thought would be very useful to discuss is specifically what's happening in the labor market and where does everybody belong in that labor market. So here's a quick overview of the presentation, a quick introduction of myself. It'll be very short. And then a little bit about BC Centre for Ability. And then we'll talk about the issue that I want to present to you, and that's the labor shortage. And then possible solutions. So what could be possible solutions to that? So we'll discuss some of the other perspectives on how recruitment can take place. And then we'll move on to why hiring candidates with disabilities provide many benefits for organizations. And then talk very briefly about what are some of the free resources and subsidies available to employers so that they can hire persons with disability. And a very quick snippet of what Accessibility BC Act says about employment. And then the very last portion of this, in order to unlock possibilities for employment for people of all abilities, is how to ask questions that would lead to conversations about accommodation or anything else that can lead to any uncomfortable situation. So I'm glad that you can join us for this morning. So first of all, My name is Mike Takulad. I'm the team lead for vocational services here at BC Center for Ability. Before working here, I've been here for 5 years. I worked for 8 years in human resources, 6 years in a hospital setting, and then 2 years in a manufacturing setting. And then I discovered the realm of vocational services. So since 2008, I've been working in this field, and it's been quite rewarding so far. I work for BC Center for Ability, and we've been around for a while here in the Lower Mainland. We're a nonprofit organization, and we do have many different programs. We're more well known for working with child and youth, specifically in our supported child development, early intervention programs, and speech language pathology, and other wonderful services we provide here. You notice even within our name, it's BC Center for Ability and not disability. So it could be focused on ability. And it's the same with our adult services, specifically vocational services, where we focus on ability and not disability. So here is the main issue at hand. So we want to talk about unlocking employment opportunities. Here's how a typical company will hire. I think most likely many of you are familiar with this. So there's a job vacancy. So what do? We take the job description and we go through it, we read it through, make sure all the qualifications are in there, all the requirements, all the duties and responsibilities are listed, and credentials, whatever we require, and then we'll put together a job posting. Now, after we put up a job posting, we collect resumes, and then we pick the best ones we think most fit the job description. And then we go through interviews and we ask them questions. Many of them probably you're very familiar with. You know, some of the questions you ask are very relevant to the posting itself. You know, you may ask questions about why do you want to work for our company? What credentials do you have that are relevant to the position? Or maybe even ask behavioral type questions. And those are excellent questions to ask. And then whoever performs well on that job interview gets offered an employment. That's a very traditional way of how we recruit. But here is a typical way we evaluate someone whether they can do the job. And this is a very effective tool. What we do is we list all the duties and tasks of the job. So for example, if someone was interviewing for a receptionist task, try to think, what does a receptionist do anyway? Well, they answer phone calls with a friendly greeting. Depending on the phone system, you want them to be able to operate a Meridian system or whatever phone system you may have to connect to extensions and voicemails. Perhaps manage the general email mailbox, coordinate room bookings, update office hours, things like that. So you can list all the tasks. And then what we try to do is we try to see which of these candidates can perform all of those tasks. So let's try to interview 3 different candidates for this position. Again, this is a very typical way of evaluating someone for a position. So the first candidate we have is Jennifer. Jennifer is a very, very lovely woman. And during the interview, we found out that she can answer phone calls with a friendly greeting. She can use the Meridian system. However, you can see here on the evaluation, she has a tough time coordinating a company calendar of events and coordinating room bookings. And catering is not her forte. And she has difficulty maintaining orderliness of the meeting rooms. Okay, so that's her assessment for this job. Let's look at the second candidate, Robert. Robert too has experience, not so much in reception, but in office admin. However, when it comes to answering phone calls with a friendly greeting, he leaves something to be desired. So he's got to work on that. He orders catering, but he has a tough time determining what a good menu is. But for the most part, he can check off all of those tasks and duties and responsibilities. He's looking good. Let's meet the third candidate for this position. It's Vanessa. Well, will you look at that? Vanessa can perform all the tasks of the job. She answers the phone call with a friendly greeting. Meridian system is not a challenge for her at all. She can coordinate a calendar, the room bookings, and amigos. You can see that she can do the job. Now, please meet Vanessa. Here she is. You notice something about this picture of Vanessa? She's definitely well dressed. She's professional. But you'll notice that she's holding on to something. What is that? Oh, it's a cane. Okay, she can perform all the duties of the job. However, maybe she has some agility issues. Maybe she has some mobility issues, or pain management could play a factor there too. Now, I don't know now whether we should hire her. I know that this is a very theoretical type of situation, but many times employers look at this situation and sometimes that's how they feel. And we'll discuss more as to why employers kind of hesitate. Not saying all of them are like that, but many would hesitate to hire someone with a cane or with a disability. That word disability can often deter an employer from hiring someone. And I know this because if you work with persons with disabilities, perhaps you're a job developer or a vocational specialist, or if you're an employer, if you're in HR, sometimes when you are trying to hire someone and you're presenting someone for a place of employment, and the word disability creeps up, second thoughts start to happen. Doubts. It's like disability. Uh-oh, should we hire someone with a disability for this position? But leave this thought for now. Hold on to this thought because we'll go back to it. Because here's the proposition that we have at BC Center for Ability. Here's what's happening in the labor market. So labor market meaning who are working or participating in the working world and where are the job vacancies. So that's in essence what the labor market information is. In BC, we have found that there is actually a labor shortage. That means there's not enough people to fill the positions that are available. Now, why is that? Let's look at some of the numbers. So in September 2022, so 2 years ago, data from the Canadian Chamber of Commerce's Business Data Lab 11 revealed that 40% of businesses, Vancouver businesses, have difficulty recruiting. And then 34% of those businesses have difficulty retaining talent. So you can imagine if 40%, that's 4 out of 10 businesses have difficulty filling their job vacancies. And 34% are having a hard time retaining their talented employees. You can imagine if you are an employer, how much this impacts your business. If you have someone quit, and then you have to go through the recruitment, interviews, checking references, onboarding, training, all of that, does that not cost money? It certainly does. Having to retain someone would definitely save you money, but it doesn't always happen. People move on. But get this as well. So there's that side from the employer's perspective. In addition, according to BDC, 45% of businesses faced higher labor costs, while 44% experienced a decline in sales, and 43% had to pay higher operating costs as a result of hiring challenges. These are some numbers that employers don't want to go through. Like, who would like a 45% of higher labor costs? Raise your hand. I don't know many employers would. Who would like to have experience a decline in sales? Raise your hand. Again, not many businesses will go for that. Or who would like to pay higher operating costs to run your business? Anyone? Yeah, many of these are a result of the labor market shortage, and also people not being retained, moving on to different positions, losing talent, basically. So here's our proposition. And in BC and British Columbia, the BC labor market outlook reveals a significant gap in supply of laborers, suggesting there are 83,000 job openings that will still need to be filled over the next 10 years after accounting for new immigrants and other newcomers to the labor force. 83,000 job openings. This morning I was talking to my colleague and she told me that Delta had a population of 24,000 people, or maybe that was Ladner. But the point is, 83,000 people, that's the size of a small town or a small city. And there's gonna be that many job openings that we'll need to fill in the province of BC. Here's my solution. Let's make robots to do these jobs. I'm actually just kidding. We could, but somebody has to make them. So we still need labor either way. So here's the recommendation. Remember Vanessa earlier? Remember how she can check off all the duties and she can perform all the tasks of the job? She's looking for work. She's part of that talented labor pool. Why not hire her? So that's in essence what we're proposing. We know that many of you may be familiar with the economics of supply and demand. You know, the greater the demand is, as you can see here in the chart, and if the less supply, you'll see how the prices are higher. If there's a greater supply and there's a lower demand, then the costs are lower. What we want is that perfect equilibrium where we just have enough job openings and just enough labor supply. How do we do that? There's always going to be people who are skillful at getting jobs on their own. But going back to, remember Vanessa, there are a lot of people looking for work who can fill these jobs. And that's our value proposition once again. Remember the stats from earlier, Canadian Chamber of Commerce business data said, 40% of the employers, 4 out of 10 have difficulty recruiting. Well, look where you can recruit though. 20% of British Columbians between the ages of 15 and 64 live with a disability, but only 65% of those are actually working. So you'll notice that's a high amount of people looking for work within that demographic. So here's our proposed takeaway. If the candidates with disabilities can perform all the functions of the job, they can do all the tasks of the job, why not give them a chance? Because if employers do, there's a supply of laborers, there'll be lower demand, and there will be an equilibrium that takes place in the whole economic labor supply and demand. This is some of the reasons why employers kind of hesitate. And likely, maybe many of you already know this. If you hire someone with a disability, it's kind of too expensive to accommodate. Maybe you have to build new doors or ramps, or maybe you have to make an elevator or something. Or the other thing is maybe we're going to have too much job modifications because maybe they can't perform all the aspects of the job. So we'll have to have someone watch over them. Or many people, when they think a person with a disability working, perhaps they imagine someone with an entry-level position because they only have entry-level skills. Or sometimes they may think, you know what, it's just too risky to hire someone with a disability. And then some may think, especially for managers, they might think, managing their performance, that's a sticky situation. It may lead to discrimination accusations. So it's like moral implication. And some might think, oh, you know what, they're just slower at their job. I don't really think there's a return on investment. I don't see a lot of business benefits. Or maybe some with mental health disability, developmental disability, a learning disability. Maybe they haven't learned how to control their emotions and their mental health, and they will just scream and throw tantrums and have too many sick days. So here's different perspective of how to think of, yes, sure, employers may think these, and maybe I myself have thought these before, I must admit. I've heard them before from other people as well. So the first question about, there's just too much to accommodate. Many of you know kinds of accommodations that may be asked from a candidate. So for example, some may ask for flexible working hours. Maybe they can't, for whatever reason, they cannot work the typical 8:30 to 4:30 or 9 to 5 or 9:30 to 5:30. So as an organization, we might think, is this going to cause our company hardship? Is it really that big of a deal if someone worked 8:30 to 4:30 instead of 9 to 5? Or instead of working a 5-day, 8-hour work week, if they work 4 days a week, a compressed schedule? Or maybe they take time off, they need time off required for medical checkups. How much time off are they going to take? Or maybe they'll require some additional equipment. Maybe they'll require a computer that has a voice to text feature or something like that. Or maybe they need a bigger screen or something. I don't know. Maybe we need to do some wheelchair accessible adaptations to our office, to our shop, our factory, our warehouse. Likely you've heard some of these before, but if we actually think about some of these accommodation requests, for example, flexible working hours, is it reasonable accommodation? If your company can do it, then great. But if you really think about it, would not all of your employees benefit from flexible working hours? Will that not make your company more attractive for these job seekers? So is this really accommodation, or is it just best practice when it comes to recruitment and employer retention? The same for time off required for medical checkups. Well, is this really just for persons with disabilities? Or can everyone, including those without disabilities, benefit from this arrangement? Or the voice to text, is that just a feature for someone with carpal tunnel? Or can we all benefit from it, even if we don't have it? I know I use it and I love it. And that's an accommodation that's typically provided to persons with disabilities. In fact, I have a colleague who works with me. Likely you may have a colleague with a disability, but my colleague who has vision loss actually pointed this out to me, and it made an impact on me, that a lot of the technological advances have happened because persons with disabilities. For example, screen readers. That technology would not have existed if there was no need for it. So there's one great benefit to hiring someone with a disability, because they often bring that fresh perspective of how things can be done differently, and many times how things can be done better. So accommodation, is that really a hardship, or is it just employment best practices? Interesting perspective, right? So that's the takeaway that we suggest. And now, let's say if an employer says, I am convinced, you know what? This was a very convincing argument. Yeah, I should not dismiss a candidate just because they have a disability. What do I do next? Remember earlier how we said, here's the traditional recruitment process, right? So you go through a job description, you post it, perhaps on Indeed, LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever you post your job posting. And then you go through the interviews, and then whoever does the best during the job interview, whoever answers those interview questions best, you offer them employment. That's we call traditional because it's most common, it's probably most well known. But many are finding a different way of recruiting people. And here's one of them. They focus on the tasks of the job rather than a description. So rather than sticking to a certain set of credentials, like educational credentials, or they must have so many years of work experience, they focus on what are the tasks of the job. So tasks. They focus on the tasks. Because if someone can perform the tasks, they can do the job. Earlier, I showed you a task checklist. You can do it on your own because your job description already has embedded in it where the tasks or the jobs are. Why not focus on those? Many employers find this very beneficial as well. Just because someone can interview or can answer interview questions very well, many times or sometimes they find that they don't necessarily perform well on the job. Why is that? Does that mean that the candidate is not right fit? How could they interview so well and not be able to do the job? Well, there are people who are very skillful in interviewing, in answering interview questions, but that's just about it. They know how to answer interview questions. It doesn't necessarily mean that they can perform the tasks of the job. So what's even better than that? Find out if they are able to do the job by having a work trial, by inviting them to see, hey, can you operate a saw? Hey, can you work in a safe manner? Well, let's see you do it. And once they're able to prove it by a work trial, then it makes sense that you offer them employment. So this is a different kind of recruitment practice where you skip the interview altogether. So again, this is a sample of a task checklist that an employer can do to evaluate whether someone can do the job or not. But the thing is, an employer sometimes, I don't know where to find help. How do I know? How can I clarify what the tasks of the job are? And how can I evaluate if someone can do the job? Well, there's all these wonderful organizations in BC that can provide you with resources and information. And this is just some of them. And I do apologize if I miss any one of our wonderful partners who work with in the employment services field, who work in the nonprofit sector, who provide services to persons with disabilities. All of these organizations can be found on the Connector website. So again, thank you to Connector for putting together a wonderful list of agencies that we can work with. We are one of them, BC Center for Ability. But as you can see, Spinal Cord Injury BC, Open Door Group, Neil Squire, Jewish Family Services, CCRW, Fable, and WorkBC services as well. And every year, Connector holds many different conferences too, where you can meet all of these agencies in one site. So I encourage you to look that up and participate to get to know where you can find more help. So once you contact one of us, what happens next? Well, we set up an employer with a vocational specialist where this vocational specialist job is to listen, observe, and learn what the job entails. That's one of the most important facets of our jobs, is to talk to an employer, find out what their needs are. And then that task checklist that I showed earlier, to focus on those. Because those task checklists are important when we're trying to evaluate whether someone can do the job or not, whether we're going to refer someone in our client caseload for that job. And then a vocational specialist too can often help with the transition into onboarding, into training, and into job coaching as well. And here's the great part about working with a vocational specialist. You know those tough, uncomfortable situations about accommodations, performance management, attendance and attitude, and all those sometimes life skills, performance skills. A vocational specialist can actually have those conversations on behalf of the employer. And then here's the great part too. A vocational specialist can also refer the employer to the wage subsidies that will help to offset, if any, some of the accommodations that that employers require for their employees. They may have access to training and funds as well, and even access to tools and materials, adaptive equipment, and other disability-related supports. So a little bit of a plug with Opportunities Fund and BC Center for Ability. By the way, we're not the only organization that administers Opportunities Fund. There's many other great organizations out there too. But with Opportunities Fund, we can help with providing a wage subsidy to offset costs up to 6 months in length, sometimes longer depending on whether the employee needs additional training. So talk to us about that For us, our eligibility for that is you have to be a Canadian citizen, permanent resident, or a refugee with protection status, so being legally entitled to work in Canada, but also self-disclose that you're a person with disability. And then our process is very simple. If you require training as well, we can provide most short course training, provided that they don't lead to a degree or diploma. If it's something more than that, please see your local WorkBC employment service. They're wonderful organizations that will provide that support, but we can also fund tools and materials as well. So many of us too have been studying and reading and catching up on the Accessible British Columbia Act of 2021. So one of the things that I will just highlight about that act is that it's actually now a law. This isn't an act, it's a law that organizations should provide regulations that are related to one of them, and it's the first one on the list, employment. So if someone asks for accessibility in employment services or in recruitment processes, interviews, job postings, we are required by law to provide them. If any other organizations, employers want or have questions about how or know what is an accessibility standard, how do I meet them, please contact one of the organizations like Connetra or even ourselves at BC Center for Ability. I'm almost done with the presentation. There's also help in terms of related to the Accessible BC Act. If you need some help with incorporating the act into your organizational procedures and policies, we have resources that we can share with you. One of them is an accessibility audit to help you whether the job postings, recruitment process is accessible. The next thing though is if you decide to, as an employer, this is for employers, I want to have that conversation with my employee with a disability or a candidate with a disability. Is there a formula as to how to ask these questions? There isn't like a word for word script, but there are some principles to keep in mind. We've asked some persons with disabilities on how to ask questions. Excuse me. And this is what's important to them. It's important to smile, to be friendly, to recognize that each colleague with a disability is unique. And one person's ideas or opinions does not necessarily represent the voice of the rest of the colleagues with a disability, that is. And then you balance that out with the other principle of avoiding asking personal and private questions. Of course, those are appreciated. We know the intent of them is you're just taking an interest. That's very well appreciated, but definitely everyone has a different comfort level when it comes to personal and private questions. So those are just the 2 tips on how to ask questions from an employer's perspective, asking questions to a candidate and an employee with a disability. So that's the presentation. We've gone over BC Center for Ability's story. We took a look at the labor shortage and how we can address it by using a different perspective, by hiring candidates with disabilities. But remember that you're not alone. There's a lot of free resources and subsidies available for you employers and for other organizations as well. And I've listed some of them earlier. Please, again, go to the Connetra website for more information or links or contacts to some of these organizations. We've also talked about how Accessible BC Act is not only is it law, but it's also a best practice for organizations to incorporate accessibility in the workplace anyway. And we also went over how to ask questions, whether it's a potential candidate or a current employee with a disability, some principles for you to take in. By doing all of these, we unlock potential. We unlock the different potential for employment for those persons with disability. Again, there is a great labor shortage, but with the great labor shortage comes a great but untapped labor pool. And that labor pool can be answered by those persons with disabilities. So let us help you discover your next new employee. Please contact us. And again, my special thanks to Connectra and Disability Foundation, to Kausar for the technical support, for Risha for arranging this for us today. And my name again is Mike Nakula from BC Center for Ability. You can reach us on www.bc-cfa.org, on X, on email, and by phone as well. Please let me know if you have any questions, and I'm more than happy to answer them. If there aren't any, I just want to express my appreciation. Thank you so much for joining this presentation. Oh, Kausar, thank you. Thank you for your support.
No problem. Okay, it was a very nice presentation.
Thank you very much. Yeah. I forgot to mention Disability Foundation and these agency lists too.
Yeah, so anybody has any questions?
Oh, thank you so much for the presentation. It was like really eye-opening, and it provided like a lot of hope. So I really appreciated it. And do we just contact you via email, and then we can set up a meeting with you, and then you can assess our situation, or what's the best way?
Oh, I'll be more than happy to, please. Maybe I'll put it in the chat, my contact information, just in case. So bear with me. Yeah, please. How do you see your name? Is it Kinga?
Kinga, yes, thank you.
Yes, please do try to get a hold of me. I'll put in my email here and my phone number.
Okay.
And I'm more than happy to speak with you further.
Okay. Yes, I can see it in the chat. Thank you so much.
Yeah, looking forward to our chat. Yeah.
Yeah, much appreciated. And I also really appreciated the calm manner that you presented everything and how organized it was, you know, and you didn't overcomplicate anything. You just touched on the basics, and then I feel like, you know, I was able to take some simple notes so I can like expand on certain things that need to be. So thank you so much. It was a very valuable presentation.
Oh, well, thank you. It's my pleasure, Kinga. Thank you for your sentiments and, you know, for joining us today. Yeah, your support is very important, and yeah, so thank you very much for that. And Robert and Gina as well, thank you very much for your thoughts.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah. Thank you, Kinga.
Okay, so I'll end the call.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Thank you, Kausar, and thank you.